Hey everyone, welcome back. Thanks for joining us. Today we've got a brand new story to share with you. So let's begin. It was September again. The golf club was shutting down for the cold season, only open for golf on weekends. The big pool and party room at the Griswold's place were also closed until spring. The year was 1958, and my life had flipped upside down. I was just starting my last year of high school. My brother, Mike, was starting his second year, and we walked to school together like we did way back in grade school. A lot had happened lately. I'd lost my first girl when she moved back to California to be with her family. And more troubling than that, I'd somehow gotten away with doing something really bad. A terrible crime. It wasn't that I thought the cops were still coming for me. It was more that I couldn't deal with what I'd done. Taking someone's life had left a mark on me, and there was really no one I could talk to about it. So, I started pulling away, keeping to myself more and more. Strangely, the more distant I became, the more attention I seemed to get, especially from the girls at school. Over the summer, I bought a black leather motorcycle jacket with some of the money I earned carrying golf bags. I'd started letting my hair grow longer on the sides and in back. I combed it back and styled the front into a Tony Curtis-like wave. I'd finally stopped growing, standing a little over 6'4", and I'd filled out to around 180 pounds. I thought maybe I looked a little like Marlon Brando in that movie about the docks. But Mike told me he'd heard some girls at school saying I looked like a sad James Dean. Well, they weren't wrong about the sad part. That afternoon, I was standing outside the school, jacket open, a cigarette hanging from my lips. You were allowed to smoke once you were off school property. I was waiting for my brother to come out so we could walk home. That's when Cindy Porter and her sister, Carol, strolled by. "Hey, Jake, how's it going?" Cindy called out. She was a junior and Carol was a sophomore like Mike. The two of them lived with their grandma in a house not far from ours. Their mom worked as a cashier at the store over at the Navy base. I think their dad had died, though I can't remember where I heard that. Their mother wasn't around much, usually living with one boyfriend or another over in another town. It wasn't unusual. She tended to move in with a new guy every 6 months or so. That's why the girls stayed with their grandma, to have some kind of normal life. My parents didn't think much of their mother, Jeannie, and if the rumors going around school were true, Cindy seemed to be heading down a similar path. "Hey, Cindy." "Hi, Carol." I greeted them. "What's this? You two actually showing up to school on the same day?" The sisters were known for skipping a lot of school. Their grandma and mother would write notes with crazy stories to cover for them. The new officer in charge of kids missing school was why he took my mother to court that summer, and she had to pay almost $200 for a lawyer. The judge told her if we missed more than 5 days of school each this year, he'd hold her in contempt of court and put her in jail for 30 days. The judge told our grandma that she'd be next too if we didn't come to school. Grandma said the judge was a damn communist busybody. "Where's Mike?" Carol asked. Except for missing so much school, Carol was a really nice kid. The funny thing about her was that even though she cut school a lot, Carol always kept up with her studies and called around to get her homework on the days she missed. When my brother was little, he used to always call himself Mikey, and the name still stuck with some of the neighborhood people who'd known him since he was real young. Ever since junior high, he'd insisted he was just plain Mike, but old habits are hard to break. "He's right behind you, gorgeous, checking out that sweet butt of yours." My brother thought of himself as a real ladies' man. He got away with saying outrageous things to girls all the time. He was the blonde one in our family, while Annie, Joan, and I were all dark-haired. He also had a dimple in his cheek that you could practically lose a coin in, it was so deep. As the youngest, he'd been babied and spoiled. My father had almost never even spanked him, let alone knocked him on his butt. Mike once told me it was because Dad was afraid of the terrible anger he would unleash. I thought it was because my dad was all worn out from all the punishment he'd handed out in the neighborhood and beyond over the years. The truth was that Mike was everybody's favorite, and we all protected him from Dad. Even Dad protected him from himself by not seeing or noticing when Mike got out of line. "Say there, ladies, you want the two of us to walk you home and protect you from the riffraff?" "Ha ha, Mikey. You are the riffraff. We need protecting from you," Carol joked. She liked Mike and he already knew it. He didn't want to get tied down by any girl, though, preferring to act like a bee and flirt with all the flowers. The two of them started off walking together and were soon half a block ahead of Cindy and me. "So, Jake," Cindy said, "rumor has it that your sweetie has flown away to California, and you're back on the market again. Is that true? Because if it is, I've got something I've been wanting to give you for the longest time." Cindy wasn't one of those shy types who hide their feelings. "She did go out to California for a visit, Cindy, but she might be coming back anytime now. We're still in love and still going steady." Though I had said this same thing to other people who had asked about her, I didn't want to deal with any more drama than I already had. I wasn't looking for a new relationship. "You're too sweet, Jake, to be spending your time waiting around. If you ever feel like hanging out or just need a friend to talk to, don't hesitate to ask. I'd be more than happy to keep you company." With that, she hurried off, trying to catch up and see how her sister was getting along with my brother. The next day, one of the girls in my English class quietly passed me a note with her name and phone number written on it. When I opened and read it, I probably turned a little red. I heard a couple of girls behind me giggling, and when I glanced back, the girl who wrote the note gave a teasing little gesture that made me quickly turn away, feeling a mix of flattered and embarrassed, though I wasn't really interested in taking it any further. Later that same day, I was outside, leaning against a wall, eating my lunch, when Penny Peters came over and started chatting with me. Penny had been the closest thing I'd had to a girlfriend before I met my last girl. Her real name was Penelope, though everyone liked to make jokes about her last name. She was a kind, cheerful girl, not as striking as my last girl, but always good company. We'd shared plenty of conversations over the years, though we'd never dated. I remember going to a cheap afternoon movie with her once when we were about 13, where we sat together and held hands. Before my last girl, I hadn't spent much time chasing after girls. But Penny was one of the kindest people I'd known and probably someone I could have gotten closer to. She was 5'2" with bright blue eyes, short red hair she kept that way because it was easier to manage, and a sprinkling of freckles she disliked, though I thought they suited her. I was more than a foot taller, but that never seemed to matter to her. "Hi, Jake. A penny for your thoughts?" That was an old joke between us going back to about the 4th grade. I hadn't heard it from her in a bunch of years. "I'll trade you a Peter for yours," I asked. My heart wasn't really in it, but it was one of those silly, slightly naughty jokes we used to find hilarious back in grade school. She grinned. "Well, since you're offering, how about a bite of your sandwich instead?" We'd swapped lunches so often over the years it had become tradition. She loved peanut butter and jelly, while I always looked forward to the meat sandwiches her mom packed, especially those leftover meatloaf sandwiches slathered in ketchup. Those were unbeatable. I handed her half of mine, and she took a big bite with a smile. "Just like old times, huh? I've missed seeing you around, Jake." I heard about her. "How's she doing now? And is Joni still over at that Catholic school? I bet she hates it there." "I know I would. Annie's getting better. She actually went back to work a little while ago. And Joan, she kind of likes that Catholic school, believe it or not. She's even thinking about becoming a nun. My dad's losing his mind over it, but Mom won't even consider pulling her out." We kept talking until the 5th period bell rang and then went our separate ways. I'd forgotten how easy it was to talk with Penny. Later, I found myself trying to recall something I'd heard about her dating someone pretty seriously last year. I couldn't remember who, but I was sure I heard over the summer that it had ended, and she was the one who ended it. By the time October rolled around, Penny reached out again. She called and asked if I'd go with her to the teen center dance on Friday night. I told her I didn't have a car, but she said she could borrow her mom's and would pick me up at 6:30 if I agreed. I said yes, though I wasn't really in the mood for dancing. That Wednesday, I was eating alone outside again when Penny came by to say hi. She asked if we could meet somewhere private after school, said she needed to explain something before things got complicated. Without thinking, I suggested the playground at Eastern Point Elementary. It had been a favorite spot of mine and my last girl before she moved back to California. We agreed to meet at 5 o'clock. That would give us time to head home, change, and maybe get some homework done. I got there a little after 5 and saw Penny on the swings, going higher than most girls ever dared. I remembered how she used to leap off the swings with the boys like it was nothing. I walked up quietly and called out so I wouldn't startle her. "Hey, Penny, a Peter for your thoughts?" "Hey, Jake, I'll give you a penny for yours." "Nah, my Peter's worth way more than a penny." "Not from what I've heard." We both burst out laughing like we were channeling those old comedy guys. Then she turned serious. "Jake, I need to ask you something before Friday. Do you know Carl Fuller? I mean, do you know that we used to go out until a couple of months ago?" As soon as she said his name, it all clicked. I remembered hearing that's who she'd been with. I knew Carl and we didn't get along. He used to carry golf bags up at the fancy club but got kicked out for stealing from members' lockers. He was maybe 20 or 21 now, with a mean temper and no problem throwing punches or worse. I'd been there years ago when my cousin, Bill, and Carl got into it at the old quarry. Bill beat him down so badly Carl had to jump into the deep water at the bottom to get away. He was crying and begging. Ever since, Carl hated anyone who'd seen him like that, especially me, being Bill's cousin. "I figured you guys had gone out," I said. "But I also heard you ended things this summer. He doesn't want it to be over. He's threatened to hurt anyone he sees me with. I'm scared of him, Jake. I just want him to leave me alone. I didn't want to ask you to the dance and then have you get jumped without warning. I need your help. He's hit me before, more than once, and my dad's too scared to do anything about it. If you help me, Jake, I'll do whatever you want. It's not like Carl and I didn't already do everything. The only difference is I might actually enjoy doing it with you." "I'm glad you told me," I said. "I wouldn't want to run into Carl without knowing he was looking for trouble. To be honest, I never liked the guy, and people who hit friends of mine, well, they usually get what's coming to them. Pick me up at 6:30. We'll go have a good time." Thanks, Jake. I knew I could count on you. Want an advanced payment on that gratitude. She looked at me, and I could tell clear as day she wasn't in the mood for that. Not really, not now. She'd go through with it, sure, but it wouldn't mean anything under these circumstances. Sorry, Penny, I said. I know you've been dreaming of this moment, but I'm considering seminary after school. Don't want to ruin the honeymoon for my future roommate. She laughed, hugged me, and shook her head. Thank you, Jake. I've really missed talking to you like this. You always made me laugh. I laughed more in this half hour than I did the entire 8 months I was with Carl. Just be careful, okay? Carl's dirty. He likes to sucker punch and kick people. Friday came and we went to the dance, stayed until it closed at 11. Carl never showed. When Penny dropped me off, I gave her a quick hug, rubbed her back a little, and hopped out. See you Monday, Penny. Drive safe. But she wasn't in school Monday or Tuesday. By Wednesday, I was worried. After school, I walked over to her house and knocked. Her mom answered and we exchanged polite hellos. When I asked about Penny, her attitude changed, evasive, uncomfortable. Eventually, she wouldn't even look me in the eye, let alone answer my questions. That night, I called Bill and told him what I knew. He said he'd make some calls and get back to me, told me to stay home for now. Around 8, he showed up at my door with John Spicer and John Garcia, 2 of his closest friends. Hey, Jake, mind stepping outside for a minute? Might want to grab a windbreaker. It's a little chilly. Before I could answer, my dad came to the door, heard Bill's voice, and insisted they all come inside. He got everyone a beer, had them sit at the kitchen table, and settled into his usual seat, clearly not going anywhere until he heard what this was all about. What are you boys getting up to? It sounds like it might be pretty sinister, the way you're all skulking around and all. My father was never the kind of man you wanted to tell to mind his own business. So, Bill started telling me what he had found out. Penny is at Carl's parents' house. Her father has been coming to work lately with his arm in a sling, saying he hurt himself in the backyard and dislocated his shoulder. Carl is telling everyone that he and Penny are back together and planning to get married soon. Jake, I really think you should stay out of this. Carl is running with a new crowd, and some of them are trouble. He's got a gun now, and he likes to show it off. He's always been unpredictable, and sooner or later, he's going to cause some serious trouble. I just hope that trouble doesn't involve you. Bill, Penny is a friend. We've gone to school together since kindergarten, for Christ's sake. She asked me to help her, and I will. So, where's Carl hanging around at night? Is that Carl Fuller you're speaking about, Fred Fuller's boy? It never failed that my father simply amazed me with his knowing just about everybody in the whole area. I could never figure out how he kept all the names and their family history straight. If that's who you're talking about, Bill, then you're correct. He's a bad one, all right. I hear tell him and a couple of his friends pistol-whipped a young sailor over a damn parking space in front of Billy Gardner's bar over in New London. Boy lost 3 teeth for a parking space. Isn't that where he hangs out, Bill? Across the street, at 64 Jefferson Avenue, in the top-floor apartment. The reason I'm passing familiar with his habits is that some friends of mine are getting tired of his shenanigans, him and his pissant friends, and they thought they'd pay them a visit one of these nights and teach them some moderation and restraint. I could make a few calls and maybe get you better information and possibly speed things along. As far as the other Uncle John, there would be at least 10 of them there, maybe more. At least 3 of them just got out of the New London State Jail. Bill, you're a good boy, but I seem to remember times when you did plenty enough things to wind up in places very similar. And that goes for the 2 scallywags sitting beside you too. But not to worry, because I think I can set the odds back to your liking with no worries at all. If you say so, Uncle John, I'm with you. So what now, Jake? We talked a little bit about things, and then Bill and I and the 2 Johns drove over to Carl's parents' house and took Penny away from there with us. My mother and my sister Annie went over and picked up Penny's parents. My father headed out to the Navy base, getting things ready on his end. By 10 o'clock that night, we were all sitting in cars over by Billy Gardner's bar. When I say all, there were at least 50 sailors who had come out there in response to my dad's calls and his quick visit to the Chiefs Club on the submarine base. I saw that several of the sailors were armed with .45 automatic pistols and wore shore patrol armbands. All of the sailors, even my father, were dressed in khaki uniforms or dungarees and t-shirts. At about 10:15, my cousin Bill, my father, and I went upstairs at 64 Jefferson Avenue and started banging on the door. It was opened by a guy I'd never seen before, and my father dragged him out by his hair and kicked him down the stairs. He made a lot of noise before, during, and after his fall, which brought 2 other fellas to the door. One of these was Carl Fuller. I took him myself and helped him down the stairs, with Bill coming down right behind me with the other one. As soon as we got downstairs, about 5 sailors with guns and SP armbands went upstairs to join my father. I was well advanced in the task of making Carl sorry that he'd ever hurt Penny when 2 loud shots rang out, and everybody stopped what they were doing. I was sitting on Carl's stomach when it happened, so I only finished that one last punch before turning my head up to where the shots were coming from. In less than a minute, the 5 SPs came down, each with a prisoner in tow. My father was the last to come down. He was dragging a body behind him, none too gently either. A U.S. Navy Shore Patrol wagon was parked right in front of the house, kitty corner from the bar. The SPs loaded everyone, including Carl, into their wagon and drove off, turning onto Bank Street with their siren wailing. All of us got into our cars and drove away. The whole thing lasted about 10 minutes from the time we went upstairs until the meat wagon drove off and we got into our cars. The Shore Patrol turned their prisoners over to the New London Police with all the guns and other illegal stuff they'd taken from the prisoners. Each SP swore out a statement detailing what had taken place when those men in their custody had attacked a group of sailors. The next day, 7 sailors came in and gave their side of the story, how they'd been cornered, beaten, and robbed the night before. They were able to point out their stolen things and give good descriptions of the guys who attacked them. In almost every case, the complaining sailor showed signs of having been recently beaten. Carl was one of the prisoners most often identified and described by nearly everyone as having been the leader. We drove home that night, and Penny was happy to see her parents safe with my mother. Bill and I drove them back to their house and told them not to worry because Carl wouldn't be bothering them for a long time to come. The next morning, Penny was back in school, seeming to be in pretty good spirits. I saw her again at lunch, and she told me about how Carl had managed to convince her to go over to his parents' house with him. After she finished describing how Carl had slapped her mother and twisted her father's arm behind his back until it had come loose from the socket, I was sorry I treated him so gently. She kept thanking me, but I told her it was really my father who had arranged almost all of it, and Cousin Bill, of course, who'd found out where she was. I walked her home after school, mostly because she was still a little frightened. I hugged her before she went inside and walked by myself the rest of the way to my house. Over the next few weeks, almost all the guys arrested that night made deals to plead guilty to lesser charges. They got sentences that ranged from 6 months on the work farm to 3 years in state prison, mostly depending on their past criminal history. Carl refused to make a deal, preferring to take his case to trial. After everyone had testified and his lawyer couldn't argue against a single accusation, Carl was sent to state prison to serve 11 years straight on 5 felony convictions. He wouldn't be eligible for release for at least 7 years. I guess Carl was eager to make a name for himself right away because he'd just been moved from the new inmate section into the main prison population when he got into a fight and was stabbed by at least one other inmate. He later died of the wounds. I took Penny to several more dances after that. I mostly sat and watched as the others danced, though it was nice there at the teen center, and it always reminded me of the love I'd been lucky enough to find there. Around Christmas time, I even managed to take Penny somewhere else on a real date, and we even had sex in the back of her mother's car. It wasn't a payoff for anything I'd done for her, though she was horny, and so was I. We started fooling around in the front seat and ended up bundled up in all our heavy winter clothes going at it in the back seat. It was interesting, but neither of us thought it was something we needed to repeat. We stayed good friends after that until she married a sailor and moved away when he was transferred. I saw her last in 1965 when she came home to bury her mother. Her father had died in 1962, but I didn't hear about that in time to make it for his funeral. I remained a loner until after I graduated high school in the summer of 1959. I had plans to go out to California for college, having applied to several schools, including the University of California at Berkeley. I ran into my last girl's grandfather at the grocery store sometime in May before my graduation. He took great pleasure in informing me that his granddaughter had found someone better suited to her and was already engaged to be married. That took some of the wind out of my sails and set me back a little in my efforts to climb out of the emotional hole I had dug for myself. I'm not really sure if I would have ever come out of my tailspin if it hadn't been for Emily Dale. She was in the same graduating year as I was and was a good friend of my sister Joan since they both went to the same Catholic high school for girls. It was about a week before my graduation, the first time Joan brought Emily over to our house. Whatever image I had previously held about innocent little Catholic schoolgirls was swept away in the very first minute I met her. She was that rarest of things, a virgin with the mind and imagination of a devil. As soon as my sister introduced her to me, she asked me whether I had a big one. I just looked at her, at once repelled and drawn in. I bet you do, don't you? Is it hard? Is it hard yet? Because if it is, it took me a few seconds before I realized that she too had read that dirty book and was now quoting and adding to it. Yes, I do have a big one. And it is hard, very, very hard, but you can't see it. I'm sorry. She now had a huge grin on her face, and my sister Joan was looking at her like she just found out her friend was an alien. And why, pray tell, not? Because I'm going out right now. And she finished the line with the dirty part from the book. The two of us looked over at Joan and collapsed in laughter. The look on Joan's face was priceless. She still had no idea what we were laughing so hard about. A few years earlier, a woman author had written that great bestseller that had found its way into the bedrooms of thousands and thousands of teenagers. At the time I read it, Some of the passages were the sexiest I'd ever been exposed to. In a few more years, they'd actually make a nighttime soap opera out of it for television, but in 1959, it was already a classic amongst a certain group that preferred reading to doing. I asked her out on a date within 5 minutes of us being introduced. I'm not sure I should risk going out with you. I'm a virgin, you know? Not for much longer, you aren't. Oh, goody. Emily and I started dating and spending time together in the whirlwind surrounding our separate graduations. I had been accepted at several universities in California but had decided for a combination of reasons to sit out a year before continuing with my studies. Emily declared that she was finished with her education and had no desire to traipse off to some university, giving herself with lustful abandon to an army of drunken fraternity strangers when she could stay right at home and attend to the carnal needs of hardworking, heavy drinking, bath-hating boat builders and fishermen. I felt that I was now too old to continue carrying golf bags, and being an escort at the Griswold hotel dances didn't hold much allure for me either. I had to do something to earn money, though, and I accidentally stumbled across the solution to that particular problem through my cousin Bill. Bill had quit his job cutting firewood for John Garcia's father after the two of them had disagreed over the amount of money Bill and his crew had coming to them after clearing a stand of wood for the state fire service. Mr. Garcia had seriously miscalculated his expenses when he had made his bid for the work and had decided that Bill and his crew would have to share in the losses he'd incurred. Bill came over to see my father about helping him get work over at the Navy base. He said he was getting desperate and had used up most of his savings taking care of his crew's back pay. My father told him he'd see if he could get Bill and his crew some work as casual laborers out at the base, but that would only last until the end of summer. Bill said he'd be grateful for any work since he wanted to keep his crew together and try to bid on some small jobs himself in the fall. The next week, Bill and his whole crew started work out at the base, cleaning up the woods around Rock Lake and making sure some of the paths got cleared of sumac and poison ivy. The work actually paid pretty well, and Bill told my father he thought he wouldn't have to give up his farm right away. Bill had put a lot of work into fixing the place up, and he and Teresa loved living out there. Something Bill had said about bidding on small jobs had started me thinking. New England had a lot of good wood growing, most of it growing too close together and in too small of total numbers per stand for easy transport through the woods. You had birch, hickory, maple, mountain ash, and a whole host of good woods that were being mostly harvested and sold as firewood. Mr. Garcia's problem, and it would soon be Bill's, was that firewood was so plentiful and easy to come by that they were selling into a buyer's market. There were areas fairly close by where the same cord of firewood, slow-burning hardwoods at least, would command 2.5 times as much as they did around southeast Connecticut. My Uncle Don had a big 2.5-ton Army surplus truck he'd gotten at a government auction very cheaply. It had 8-foot side rails and back locking rails with an open top. I figured it would hold at least 10 cords of stacked hardwood firewood. My uncle had fixed the truck up so that it ran in tip-top condition but then found he had no use for it. He had talked with my father recently about him finding a buyer for the truck. He wanted $400 for the truck and would throw in extra rails and several canvas tops for covers. I bought the truck, borrowing $100 from my father. I got the truck and took it over to Bill's farm and told him to fill it with birch that he had cut and stacked on his property and was selling for a real good price. He managed to fit 12 cords into the truck. I figured I was a tad over the legal weight limit, but I wasn't worried too much about that. I took off in the early evening and pulled into New Haven 2.5 hours later. My grandfather on my mother's side was a conductor on the New York, New Haven, and Hartford Railroad. He and my grandmother had separated 30 years before, and he liked to keep at least 90 miles between the two of them. When he left, he not only left a wife but 10 children as well. He did send money from time to time, but if you wanted to hear world-class swearing, all you had to do was mention his name in front of my grandmother. I went to his apartment in New Haven and slept on his sofa. The next morning, he took me over to a poker buddy of his, and I sold my load of wood to him for a $160 profit. We made a deal that I'd bring him another 12 cords in 2 weeks at the same price. I got back in the truck, took my grandfather back to his place, and then drove home. After I paid my father back the money I'd borrowed for the truck and gave Bill his payment for the wood, I still had $60 earned. I took Emily out that night, and we celebrated by having 2 huge lobster tails in a restaurant by the river. These tails weighed over 2 pounds each, having been stuffed with mushroom stuffing and then baked just like my mother did it. We had drawn butter with baked potatoes and corn on the cob. With the 2 Cokes we each had, the bill came to $11. I didn't care, though. I'd had my first taste of business success and was well on my way to creating a lifestyle that would bring me pleasure, if not wealth. This was my 3rd date with Emily, and we had found out a lot of information about each other. I was her very first real date or boyfriend, whatever. In her mind, though, she was this woman of 1,000 experiences. She freely admitted that she had participated in literally hundreds of torrid one-sided fantasy affairs with boys and men that she had seen over the years. She told me that she began masturbating at the age of 9 and hadn't missed a single day of giving herself pleasure and gratification in all those intervening years. She maintained that her sex life was probably the best of all her family and acquaintances and that she had never disappointed herself, given sufficient time, privacy, and the necessary reading material. She and I quickly made a pact that we could speak to each other of anything, but that I would defer to her judgment about any actual physical contact other than the hugs and innocent kisses that we'd already shared. She had the most active imagination of anyone I'd ever known, and nothing was too outrageous for her to have thought about or considered doing. She could swear like a sailor home on leave and would play different roles while out in public with me. On this particular date, she was pretending that she was my wife and was explaining why she had been unfaithful to me. She did this just loud enough so that the older couple just being seated in the booth next to ours could get an earful. Howie, I know we both promised that we'd never stray from our wedding vows, but you know things haven't been the same for us since your unfortunate accident. Have they? Don has a whole one bigger than yours ever was, and his wasn't cut like yours. And another thing, it started out so innocent, not like we planned it or anything. I had mentioned to him at work, about your problem and how it just didn't seem like it was worth all the trouble. And I guess I must have started crying because he started hugging me and patting me on the back, sort of comforting me. I think for just a minute he reminded me of how we used to be before your tool got cut off and all. So when he was hugging me, I felt him, and I thought for just a minute that Dawn was carrying a gun. So when I reached down to stop it from poking at me, and well, I found out that it wasn't a gun after all. I was trying not to laugh or smile as Emily continued talking about this other guy while the couple sitting next to us grew more uncomfortable. The man kept glaring at me, clearly hoping I would get Emily to stop discussing personal matters so they could relax and enjoy their meal. I was embarrassed, but I couldn't help finding the situation a bit amusing. It got a bit awkward when the woman leaned over to Emily and gently suggested that maybe a restaurant wasn't the best place for a conversation like the one we were having. I know you're right, Emily replied. I wanted to talk to him at our apartment, but I didn't want to wake up Dawn, who's asleep in our bed, and this guy wasn't comfortable going out to the living room to talk, not with his parents sitting there on the couch, upset after showing up unexpectedly and finding me in a bit of an awkward situation. So this was the only place I could think of. She then leaned forward slightly as if sharing a secret. Besides, having a busy day always makes me hungry, doesn't it? You should try the lobster here, it's really good. After finishing her meal, Emily picked up her napkin, wiped her lips, and stood up. I grabbed the check and left a small tip for our waitress. As I quickly walked to the register, I heard Emily telling the woman, "We're kind of in a hurry because Don's working the night shift tonight, and he likes to have a quick chat before he heads out to work." She then smiled and said, "It was nice to meet you both," as she shook their hands. The man even stood up from the booth when shaking her hand. I don't think I ever had as much fun or embarrassment on any date or other outing in my life. Thanks for listening. This story isn't over yet, and things are about to get even more intense. Stay tuned for the next part to see what happens next.